I was standing in my driveway at 6:30 in the morning, watching a woman I had never seen before march across my front lawn with my brand new electric snow shovel clutched in her manicured hands like she owned the thing. The November storm had dumped 8 inches of snow on our neighborhood in Lakewood, Colorado overnight, and I had just stepped outside to grab my shovel from the garage when I spotted her. She was wearing a puffy white coat that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, designer boots that were completely inappropriate for snow, and an expression of pure entitlement that I had come to recognize in the 3 months since moving into this planned community. "Excuse me," I called out, my breath fogging in the cold air. "That's my snow shovel." She stopped mid-stride and turned to look at me with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of a shoe. "I don't think so." This was sitting in the community storage area, which means it's available for all residents to use. I blinked at her, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity. That was in my garage, my closed garage, the one attached to my house. Well, the door was open when I walked by, and according to HOA Regulations Section 12.4, any items left visible from the street are subject to community sharing protocols during weather emergencies. She said this with the confidence of someone who had memorized the HOA handbook and used it as a weapon on a regular basis. I had read the HOA handbook cover to cover when I bought the house, and I was absolutely certain no such regulation existed. That's not a real rule. And even if it were, my garage door was closed. I just opened it 2 minutes ago. "Are you calling me a liar?" Her voice went up an octave, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I was dealing with one of those people. The kind who lived for confrontation and had probably been president of the HOA for the past decade, making everyone's life miserable with her invented rules and petty power trips. "I'm saying you have my snow shovel, and I'd like it back." I kept my voice calm and even, the same tone I used when dealing with difficult clients at my software company. She pulled out her phone with one hand, keeping a death grip on my shovel with the other. "I'm calling the HOA president right now. We'll see what she has to say about your hostile attitude." "You're not the president. I'm the vice president. Linda is the president, and she's going to be very interested to hear about your violation of community standards." She was already tapping on her screen, bringing the phone to her ear. I stood there in the cold, wearing my old college sweatshirt and pajama pants, watching this stranger make a phone call about my own property while holding said property hostage. The absurdity of the situation was almost funny, except for the part where I needed to clear my driveway before heading to work, and this woman had literally stolen the tool I needed to do it. "Linda, it's Brenda." "Yes, I know it's early, but we have a situation." "I'm at 4752 Pinecrest Drive, and the resident here is being extremely aggressive about his snow removal equipment." Brenda was now pacing back and forth on my lawn, leaving deep footprints in the fresh snow. Yes, I was doing my community service rounds, checking to make sure everyone was following the snow removal timeline requirements, and I found this electric shovel that was left out in violation of the aesthetic guidelines. Now he's claiming it's his and demanding I return it. I could hear a tinny voice on the other end of the line, though I couldn't make out the words. Brenda's expression shifted from righteous indignation to smug satisfaction. "She'll be here in 10 minutes, Brenda announced, ending the call. "And she's bringing the compliance forms. I hope you're prepared to pay the fines for early morning disturbances and improper equipment storage." It's 6:30 in the morning. I disturbed nobody, and the shovel was in my garage. I was starting to lose my patience, which was probably exactly what she wanted. "The sound of your garage door opening before 7 a.m. is a violation of the quiet hours policy, and I've already documented the equipment violation with photos. She held up her phone, showing me a blurry picture of my garage interior taken from my driveway. Did you just admit to taking pictures into my private garage? It was visible from the street, public view doctrine. She said this like she was a lawyer, though I highly doubted she had any legal training whatsoever. I decided to try a different approach. Look, I don't want any trouble. I just want my snow shovel so I can clear my driveway and get to work. You can use it when I'm done if you need it. I don't need your permission to use community equipment, Brenda said icily. And I'm certainly not going to wait for you to finish using it first. I have 17 driveways to clear before 8 a.m. That stopped me cold. 17 driveways. Are you planning to clear other people's driveways with my shovel? The HOA provides snow removal services for elderly and disabled residents. It's part of our community care program. Linda and I volunteer our time to make sure everyone stays safe during winter weather events. She said this like she was expecting a medal for her service. That's actually nice of you, I admitted, trying to find some common ground. But you still can't just take people's property to do it. The HOA must have equipment for that. Our snow blower broke last week, and we're still waiting for the replacement part, so I'm improvising with available resources. She clutched my shovel tighter, as if I was about to rush her and take it back by force. Available resources that don't belong to you. A white Lexus SUV pulled up to the curb, and a woman who looked like Brenda's slightly older clone emerged. She was wearing a similar puffy coat in cream instead of white, and she had the same severe bob haircut that seemed to be the unofficial uniform of HOA board members everywhere. Xavier, I presume. She walked up my driveway with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire life. I'm Linda McKenzie, HOA president. Brenda has informed me that you're refusing to cooperate with our community service initiatives. Hi, Linda. I'm Xavier Anderson, and I've been living here for 3 months. This is actually the first time we've met. I extended my hand, which she looked at like I was offering her a dead fish. I know who you are. You're the one who painted your front door without pre-approval from the Architectural Review Committee. Linda pulled out a tablet from her enormous leather purse and began scrolling through it. I painted it the same color it already was. I was just refreshing the existing paint. Any exterior changes require written approval, regardless of whether you're changing the color. That's in Section 8.2 of the Community Guidelines. Linda turned the tablet around to show me a scanned copy of the handbook with the relevant section highlighted. I honestly had no idea. I'm sorry about that. Can we deal with that later? Right now, I just need my snow shovel back so I can clear my driveway. This shovel. Linda walked over to Brenda and took it from her hands, examining it like it was evidence in a criminal trial. This is a Greenworks model, retail value approximately $200. Brenda found it in what she believed to be a community storage area. It was in my garage, my private personal garage. Was your garage door open at the time? Linda asked. No, it was closed. I opened it right before she took the shovel. Brenda made a scoffing sound. That's not true. The door was wide open when I walked by. I assumed it was the community storage unit because it had so much junk in it. Junk? That's my moving boxes. I'm still unpacking. I felt my face getting hot despite the cold temperature. Linda held up a perfectly manicured hand. Let's not get emotional here. I'm sure we can resolve this like adults. Brenda, when exactly did you retrieve the shovel? About 15 minutes ago. I was doing my morning rounds, checking for compliance issues, and I noticed the open garage. I looked inside, saw the shovel, and assumed it was community property since it was just sitting there unused during a snow emergency. And Xavier, when did you open your garage door? Like I said, right before I came outside, maybe 5 minutes ago. I saw her walking away with my shovel, and that's when I called out to her. Linda looked between us, her expression suggesting she was weighing our testimonies like a judge. So we have conflicting accounts of when the garage door was opened. Brenda, do you have any evidence that the door was already open when you arrived? Just my word, which should be sufficient. I've been on the HOA board for 6 years, and I've never lied about a compliance issue. And I'm telling you the truth, I said firmly. She took my property without permission. That's theft, regardless of whether she thought it was community property. Linda's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening to involve the police over a simple misunderstanding? I'm saying that if someone takes something that doesn't belong to them, that's stealing. I don't want to involve the police. I just want my shovel back. The HOA has certain rights and responsibilities when it comes to community property and emergency situations, Linda said, launching into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. During a declared weather emergency, which this snowstorm qualifies as, the board has the authority to commandeer necessary equipment for the safety and well-being of all residents. That's not a real law. You can't just commandeer private property. It's in our community bylaws, which you agreed to when you purchased your home. Linda was scrolling through her tablet again. Here it is, Section 19.7. In the event of a community emergency, the HOA board reserves the right to utilize all available resources to ensure resident safety. I thought about pointing out that utilizing available resources probably didn't mean stealing from people's garages, but I could tell I was fighting a losing battle. These two had obviously done this kind of thing before, and they had their justifications down pat. Fine, I said, trying a different tactic. How long do you need the shovel for? I have to leave for work by 8:30, and I need to clear my driveway first. Linda and Brenda exchanged a look. The community service rounds typically take 3 to 4 hours, Linda said. We should have it back to you by 10 or 11. That doesn't work for me. I'll be gone by then. Can you do my driveway first and then take it for your rounds? We have a specific route we follow based on priority needs. The elderly residents get serviced first, then the disabled, then anyone with medical conditions. You don't fall into any of those categories. Brenda was already turning away, clearly done with this conversation. Wait, I said, a note of desperation creeping into my voice. I'll clear my own driveway with a regular shovel and you can take the electric one for your rounds. Just please bring it back when you're done, and don't break it. Linda made a note on her tablet. That seems reasonable. We'll have it back to you by noon at the latest. And in the future, please keep your garage door closed and make sure all equipment is properly stored out of sight. We have very strict aesthetic guidelines in this community. My garage door was closed, I muttered, but they were already walking away, Brenda carrying my $200 snow shovel like she had just won a prize. I spent the next 40 minutes clearing my driveway with an old plastic shovel I found buried in the back of my garage. My back was killing me by the time I finished, and I was already late for a morning meeting. I jumped in the shower, threw on some work clothes and headed to the office, trying to push the bizarre morning encounter out of my mind. Work was the usual chaos of back-to-back meetings, urgent emails, and a server issue that took 3 hours to resolve. I didn't get home until almost 6 p.m., exhausted and hungry and not in the mood for any more HOA drama. But as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something was missing from my front porch. My snow shovel wasn't there. I checked the garage, not there either. I walked around the side of my house, thinking maybe they had left it by the back door. Nothing. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the HOA directory until I found Linda's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Xavier, how can I help you?" "Hi, Linda. I was just wondering about my snow shovel. You said you'd have it back by noon and it's not here." "Oh yes, about that. We ran into a small issue during the community service rounds." My stomach dropped. "What kind of issue?" "Well, Brenda was using the shovel at Mrs. Henderson's house, and apparently the motor burned out. We're not sure what happened exactly, but it just stopped working." "Burned out? Those shovels are designed to run for hours. How long was she using it?" "Not long at all. Maybe 5 minutes. She said it started making a terrible grinding noise and then smoke came out of it and then it just died." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "So let me get this straight. You took my brand new shovel without permission, used it for your own purposes, broke it within 5 minutes, and now you're calling to tell me it's destroyed." "I wouldn't say destroyed. More like temporarily non-functional. We're going to have it looked at by a repair person. It's a $200 shovel and it's brand new." "What did she do to it?" I really couldn't say. But these things happen when you use equipment during emergency situations. There's always a risk of damage. "There's a risk when you steal people's property," I said, my voice rising. "This is unbelievable. You need to replace it." "Actually, according to Section 19.7, which I mentioned this morning, the HOA is not liable for damage to equipment used during community emergencies. It's right there in the bylaws. I never agreed to let you use my equipment for a community emergency. You took it from my garage without asking. We had a good faith belief that it was available for community use. The fact that it broke during use is unfortunate, but it's not the HOA's responsibility to replace it." Linda's voice had lost all pretense of politeness now. She was in full bureaucrat mode, hiding behind rules and regulations. "This is theft and destruction of property. You're going to replace my shovel or I'm going to take legal action." I'd advise against that. The legal fees alone would far exceed the cost of a replacement shovel. Plus, if you sue the HOA, we'll have to use community funds for our defense, which means everyone's dues will go up. Your neighbors won't be happy about that. Are you seriously threatening me right now? I'm simply explaining the reality of the situation. Now, I have to go. We have a board meeting starting in 10 minutes. Have a good evening, Xavier." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my driveway, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 12 hours, my HOA vice president had stolen my property, broken it through negligence or incompetence, and now the president was refusing to replace it while threatening me with social consequences if I pushed back. I went inside and poured myself a beer, then sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. I pulled up the HOA bylaws and started reading through them carefully, looking for the sections Linda had referenced. Section 8.2, about exterior changes, was real enough, though it seemed excessive to require approval for painting a door the same color. Section 12.4, which Brenda had cited about community sharing protocols, didn't exist at all. Section 19.7 was real, but the actual text was much more limited than Linda had suggested. The bylaw stated that during a declared community emergency, such as a natural disaster or significant weather event, the HOA board could coordinate volunteer efforts and organize community resources. There was nothing about commandeering private property, and there was definitely nothing about immunity from liability if they damaged someone's stuff. I took a screenshot of the relevant section and started drafting an email to Linda, laying out my position in clear terms. I explained that Section 19.7 did not give them the right to take property without consent, that their interpretation was legally questionable at best, and that I expected a replacement shovel within 7 business days, or I would pursue the matter through small claims court. I hit send and waited. The response came back within an hour, but it wasn't from Linda. It was from an email address I didn't recognize, with the sender name HOA Legal Counsel. The email was formal and threatening. It stated that I was in violation of multiple community guidelines, including the unauthorized door painting, the early morning disturbance, and now harassment of board members. It listed a series of fines totaling $800 and stated that if the fines weren't paid within 30 days, the HOA could place a lien on my property. I read the email 3 times, my anger building with each pass. This was retaliation, pure and simple. They broke my property, I asked for compensation, and now they were burying me in made-up fines to punish me for speaking up. I forwarded the email to my friend Marcus, who was a real estate attorney in Denver. He called me back within 15 minutes. "Xavier, what the hell did you do to piss off your HOA? The vice president stole my snow shovel and broke it. Now they're retaliating with all these bogus fines." Marcus laughed, though there wasn't much humor in it. "Sounds about right for an HOA. These organizations attract the worst kind of petty tyrants. Let me look into this. Forward me all the relevant documents, including the bylaws and any communications you've had with the board members. Can they really fine me for painting my door the same color? If it's in the bylaws and you agreed to it when you bought the house, then technically yes. But that doesn't mean the fines are reasonable. And this email from their legal counsel is interesting. A lot of HOAs claim to have lawyers on retainer, but they're usually just trying to intimidate residents. I'm going to do some digging and see if this law firm actually exists. What should I do in the meantime? Document everything. Keep copies of all communications. If you see Brenda or Linda, be polite but don't engage in long conversations. And definitely don't pay those fines yet. Let me see what we're dealing with first. I spent the rest of the evening organizing my documentation. I had photos of the snow shovel from when I first bought it, the receipt showing I paid $215 including tax, and screenshots of all my email exchanges with Linda. I also wrote up a detailed timeline of the morning's events, including Brenda's admission that she took the shovel from my garage and Linda's acknowledgement that they broke it. The next morning, I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Brenda standing on my porch, holding a clipboard and wearing a neon orange vest that said HOA Compliance Officer. "Good morning, Xavier. I'm here to conduct a routine property inspection." "A property inspection? Of what?" "The interior and exterior of your home. It's part of our quarterly compliance review. All residents are subject to random inspections to ensure they're maintaining community standards." I stared at her, trying to determine if she was serious. "You want to inspect the inside of my house?" "That's correct." "It should only take about 30 minutes. I'll need access to all rooms, including the garage, basement if you have one, and any storage areas. And if I say no, then I'll have to note that you refuse to cooperate with the inspection, which is itself a violation subject to fines. It's in Section 14.9 of the bylaws." I pulled out my phone and opened the PDF of the bylaws, scrolling to Section 14. Section 14.9 says that the HOA can inspect exterior elements of the property, including landscaping, driveways, and visible structural components. It says nothing about interior inspections. Brenda's expression hardened. I have the authority to conduct inspections as I see fit in my role as compliance officer. No, you don't. You have the authority defined in the bylaws, which doesn't include entering my home. And honestly, after you stole and broke my property yesterday, I'm not inclined to let you anywhere near my house. I did not steal anything. I utilized community resources during an emergency situation, and the shovel's motor failure was due to a manufacturing defect, not anything I did. A manufacturing defect that occurred within 5 minutes of you using it, on a brand new shovel that worked perfectly fine when I tested it at the store. That's quite a coincidence. I don't appreciate your tone. You're being hostile and uncooperative, which reflects poorly on your character and your commitment to our community values. Brenda was writing furiously on her clipboard now. What are you writing? Documenting your behavior for the board meeting tonight. We're discussing your case and determining appropriate next steps. My case? I'm the victim here. You took my property and destroyed it. That's your interpretation. The board has a different perspective, and we're the governing body of this community. Your opinion is noted but ultimately irrelevant. She turned on her heel and marched down my driveway, leaving me standing in the doorway, stunned by her audacity. I called Marcus again and told him about the attempted inspection. He listened carefully, asking a few clarifying questions, and then sighed deeply. These people are absolutely nuts. I've seen bad HOAs before, but this is next level. They're not just power hungry, they're actively retaliating against you for standing up for yourself. Here's what I found out. The law firm that sent you that threatening email. It doesn't exist. I searched the Colorado Bar Association database, and there's no firm by that name registered in the state. So they're making up fake lawyers now. It's more common than you'd think. HOAs will sometimes send threatening letters on fake law firm letterhead to scare residents into compliance. It's legally questionable at best, and could potentially be considered fraud. I'm going to send them a response from my actual law firm, making it clear that you're represented by counsel and that any further communications should go through me. Will that stop them? Maybe. Or it might escalate things. These kinds of people don't like being challenged, especially by actual lawyers who know what they're talking about. But either way, it'll make them think twice before pulling any more stunts. That evening, I got a notification on my phone from the neighborhood app that the HOA was having an emergency board meeting. The agenda included only one item: discussion and potential disciplinary action regarding violations by resident at 4752 Pinecrest Drive. I showed up at the community center at 7 p.m., where the meeting was being held. There were about 20 people in the room, mostly older residents who looked like they attended these meetings religiously. Linda and Brenda were sitting at a table at the front of the room, along with two other people I didn't recognize. Linda called the meeting to order and went through some preliminary business, approving minutes from the last meeting and discussing the budget for holiday decorations. Then she got to the main event. As many of you know, we've been having some issues with a newer resident who doesn't seem to understand or respect our community guidelines. Xavier Anderson, are you here? I raised my hand. I'm here. Good. We wanted to give you an opportunity to address the board and explain your pattern of violations and hostile behavior toward HOA representatives. I stood up, my heart pounding. Public speaking had never been my strong suit, but I wasn't about to let these people steamroll me. I'd be happy to explain my side of things. Yesterday morning, Brenda took my personal property from my garage without permission. She then used it for several hours, despite promising to return it by noon, and managed to burn out the motor within 5 minutes of use. When I asked the HOA to replace the shovel, I was met with threats and fake legal documents. Now I'm being retaliated against with made-up fines and violations. That's the situation from my perspective. There was some murmuring from the audience. Linda held up her hand for silence. That's an interesting interpretation, but it's not supported by the facts. Brenda was performing her duties as a community service volunteer when she found equipment that appeared to be available for community use. The equipment failure was unfortunate, but not her fault. And as for retaliation, that's a serious accusation that you cannot substantiate. The violations we've documented are real and legitimate concerns about your compliance with community standards. An older man in the front row raised his hand. Linda, can I ask a question? What exactly did this young man do that was so wrong? It sounds like there was a misunderstanding about the shovel, but does that really warrant all this? Linda's expression tightened. Frank, we have very clear guidelines in this community and everyone has to follow them. We can't make exceptions just because someone is new or claims they didn't understand the rules. The violations include unauthorized exterior painting, noise disturbances during quiet hours, improper equipment storage, and harassment of board members. I painted my door the same color it was, I interjected. I opened my garage door at 6:30 in the morning, which is hardly the middle of the night. I stored my shovel in my own garage, which is where shovels belong, and I haven't harassed anyone. I simply asked for my property back and requested compensation when it was destroyed. A woman in the back spoke up. How much does a snow shovel cost? I can't imagine it's worth all this drama. $215, I said. It was a nice electric model, brand new. There were some gasps from the audience. Apparently $200 for a snow shovel was more than some of them expected. Brenda stood up, her face flushed. The shovel was not destroyed. It experienced a mechanical failure that may or may not be covered under warranty. And the cost is irrelevant. The issue is whether this resident is willing to be a team player and contribute to our community, or whether he's going to be difficult and litigious every time something doesn't go his way. I'm not being litigious, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm asking for basic fairness. If you borrow someone's property and break it, you replace it. That's not a legal concept, that's just common decency. Frank spoke up again. He's got a point, Linda. If Brenda broke his shovel, even accidentally, seems like the right thing to do would be to replace it or at least split the cost. The HOA has a limited budget, Linda said. We can't go around replacing everyone's personal property every time something breaks. That's not what dues are for. But you had no problem using my personal property for HOA purposes, I pointed out. You can't have it both ways. Either the shovel was community property, in which case the HOA should have bought it in the first place, or it was my property, in which case you had no right to take it and you're liable for the damage. Another woman spoke up. I'm confused about how the shovel broke. Brenda, what exactly happened? Brenda shifted uncomfortably. I was clearing Mrs. Henderson's driveway, which has a slight slope to it. I was pushing the shovel up the incline when it started making a noise. Then some smoke came out and it stopped working. What kind of noise? I asked. A grinding sound, like something was stuck. Did you turn it off when you heard the grinding? I thought it would work itself out. It was probably just some ice or something caught in the mechanism. I felt my jaw clench. So you heard a grinding noise that indicated something was wrong, and instead of stopping, you kept pushing it until the motor burned out. It wasn't like that. It all happened very fast. Electric snow shovels have automatic shut-offs when they overheat or encounter resistance. The only way to burn out the motor is to override the safety features or force it to work under conditions it's not designed for. What were you doing with it? Brenda's face was now bright red. I was just clearing snow. That's what it's designed for. Was there ice? Packed snow? Did you try to use it on gravel or concrete? There might have been some ice. I don't remember exactly. I was doing community service at 6:30 in the morning, volunteering my time to help our elderly residents, and you're interrogating me like I'm a criminal. I'm trying to understand how you managed to destroy a brand new, $200 piece of equipment in under 5 minutes. Linda banged her hand on the table. That's enough. This isn't a trial. We're here to discuss your violations, not to put Brenda on the witness stand. The board has reviewed your case, and we've decided on the following actions. You will pay the $800 in fines within 30 days. You will issue a written apology to Brenda for your hostile and accusatory behavior. And you will attend a community orientation session to better understand our guidelines and values. If you comply with these requirements, we'll consider the matter closed. If you don't, we'll proceed with placing a lien on your property. I looked around the room, trying to gauge the crowd. Some people looked uncomfortable with how this was going down. Others seemed to be enjoying the drama. Frank looked actively annoyed. I'm not paying fines for violations I didn't commit. I'm not apologizing for asking for my property back. And I'm definitely not attending an orientation session run by people who think it's acceptable to steal and break other people's things. I kept my voice calm but firm. Then we'll proceed with the lien, Linda said coldly. This meeting is adjourned. People started filing out and a few of them approached me. Frank was the first. Son, I've been living here for 12 years and I've seen Linda and Brenda pull this kind of thing before. They think they run the place like it's their personal fiefdom. Most people just pay the fines and move on because it's easier than fighting. But what they did to you was wrong, and you're right to push back. Thanks, I said, grateful for at least one ally. Do you know anyone else who's had problems with them? Oh, plenty of people. There's a whole group of us who are fed up with how they run things. We've been talking about trying to vote them out at the next election, but it's hard to organize because Linda controls all the official communication channels. She decides what goes in the newsletter and what gets posted on the community boards. A younger woman approached, looking nervous. I'm Sarah. I live on Maple Street. Last year, Brenda cited me for having the wrong shade of white on my mailbox. I had to repaint it 3 times before she approved it, and I never could figure out what the difference was. I spent $200 on painter and paint for a mailbox. I'm Tom, said a middle-aged man. They fined me $500 for parking my work truck in my driveway overnight. It's a regular pickup truck, not even that big, but apparently commercial vehicles aren't allowed. I'm a plumber. I need my truck for work. I fought it for months and eventually just paid the fine because it wasn't worth the stress. Over the next 20 minutes, I heard story after story of HOA overreach and petty tyranny. Linda and Brenda had created a culture of fear in the neighborhood, where people were afraid to do anything that might attract their attention. And anyone who pushed back faced escalating fines and threats until they either complied or moved away. Have you thought about going to a lawyer? Frank asked. These HOAs have a lot of power, but they're not above the law. Actually, I've already been talking to a lawyer friend of mine. He's looking into the legal issues around the shovel and the fake legal threat they sent me. But I'm also thinking bigger picture now. If this many people are unhappy with how things are being run, maybe we need to challenge their leadership more formally. I like the way you think, Frank said. Why don't you come over to my place tomorrow evening? I'll invite some of the other folks who are fed up with this situation. We can talk about our options. I agreed and got Frank's address. As I walked to my car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was angry about my shovel and the way I'd been treated, but I was also oddly energized. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up to bullies who had been terrorizing an entire neighborhood. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange notice stuck to my front door. It was an official HOA citation for unauthorized gathering and conspiracy to disrupt community governance. Apparently, someone at the meeting had reported that I was talking to other residents about organizing against the board. The notice stated that I was forbidden from discussing HOA business with other residents except during official meetings, and that any violation of this order would result in additional fines of $100 per incident. It was signed by Linda and dated that morning. I took a photo of the notice and texted it to Marcus with the caption, "Is this even legal?" He called me immediately. "Hell no, that's not legal. They can't forbid you from talking to your neighbors. That's a blatant violation of your First Amendment rights. This is actually great news for us." How is it great news? Because they're getting sloppy. They're so used to people caving to their demands that they're overreaching and creating a clear paper trail of abuse of power. Keep that notice. Keep every ridiculous thing they send you. We're building a case here. A case for what? Could be a few things. Harassment, violation of civil rights, possibly fraud if we can prove that fake legal letter was intended to deceive. And if they actually try to put a lien on your property over these bogus fines, that's another cause of action. How many other residents are having similar problems? I met at least 6 or 7 last night who had stories, and apparently there are more. Perfect. If we can get a group of residents together, we could potentially file a class action, or at least present a united front to remove these people from power. But first things first, let me send them a formal cease and desist letter regarding the harassment and the fake legal communications. That should at least slow them down. That evening, I went to Frank's house and found a dozen other residents already there, sitting in his living room and trading HOA horror stories. Frank introduced me around, and I learned that the problem was even worse than I'd realized. There was Margaret, who had been fined for having flowers that were the wrong color in her front garden. David, who had been cited for his teenager's car being parked on the street overnight. Rachel, who had been threatened with fines because her house number plaques were allegedly half an inch too small, and on and on. "The thing is," Frank said, "Linda and Brenda have been running this HOA basically unopposed for 6 years. People run against them occasionally, but Linda controls the ballot process and the vote counting. It's hard to prove anything, but the results always seem to heavily favor the current board, even when you'd think they'd be unpopular." "That sounds like election fraud," I said. "Probably is, but it's hard to prove. The ballots are paper and they're counted in a closed session with only board members present. They announce the results at the annual meeting and that's that. When's the next election? Not until March, 4 months away." "So what do we do in the meantime?" Sarah asked. "I can't afford to keep paying these ridiculous fines, and I'm sure I'm not the only one." "We organize," I said. "We document everything they do. We show up to every board meeting in force. We make it clear that they don't have the support of the community anymore, and if they keep pushing, we take legal action." "Legal action is expensive," Tom pointed out. "Most of us can't afford a lawyer. My friend Marcus is a real estate attorney, and he's already helping me with my case. I'll ask if he'd be willing to take on a broader challenge to the HOA's actions. In the meantime, we need to start building our case. Everyone here needs to write down every violation you've been cited for, every fine you've paid, every interaction you've had with Linda or Brenda that seemed inappropriate. We need dates, amounts, and as much detail as possible." We spent the next 2 hours going through everyone's experiences and creating a shared document with all the information. By the end of the night, we had documented over $15,000 in fines levied against the residents in that room alone, most of them for trivial or made-up violations. We had multiple instances of Linda and Brenda entering people's property without permission. We had evidence of selective enforcement, where some residents were heavily scrutinized while others who were friends with the board were ignored for obvious violations. "This is a pattern of harassment and abuse of power," Frank said, reviewing the document. "No way this is legal." "It's not," I said, "and we're going to prove it." Over the next few weeks, things escalated quickly. Linda and Brenda seemed to realize they were losing control of the narrative, and they responded by doubling down on their aggressive tactics. More fines were issued. More threatening notices appeared on doors. They even started showing up at people's houses for surprise inspections that had no basis in the bylaws. Marcus sent them a formal cease and desist letter, which they ignored. They responded with their own letter from the fake law firm, threatening to sue him for interfering with HOA business. Marcus actually laughed when he got that one. "They really don't understand how any of this works," he told me. "You can't threaten a lawyer with a fake lawyer. That's like trying to rob a bank with a toy gun while the guards are watching." The situation came to a head in early December. I came home from work one evening to find Linda and Brenda in my backyard, taking photos of my patio furniture. I had left a couple of chairs and a small table out there, covered with tarps for the winter. "What are you doing in my backyard?" I called out, walking quickly toward them. "Documenting violations," Linda said, not even looking up from her camera. "You have unauthorized outdoor furniture that doesn't meet our aesthetic standards, and these tarps are the wrong color. They need to be brown or green, not blue. Get out of my yard. Now." "This is private property and you're trespassing." "We have the right to conduct inspections," Brenda said. "It's in the bylaws." "No, it's not. The bylaws allow for inspections of exterior elements visible from the street. My backyard is not visible from the street. It's fenced and private." "You're trespassing, and if you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police." Linda finally looked up, her expression icy. "Go ahead and call them. We'll explain that we're performing our duties as HOA board members and you're interfering with community governance. See how that goes for you." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I'd like to report 2 people trespassing on my property." That got their attention. Linda and Brenda exchanged a look and then started walking toward my back gate. But they moved slowly, deliberately, making sure to take a few more photos as they went. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. I met them at the front door and explained the situation, showing them the bylaws on my phone, and pointing out that there was no provision for board members to enter private backyards without permission. The officer listened patiently and then asked to speak with Linda and Brenda, who were waiting by their car at the curb. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see Linda gesturing emphatically and Brenda pointing at her clipboard. After a few minutes, the officer came back to me. "Sir, they claim they have the authority to inspect properties as part of their HOA duties. Do you have documentation showing they don't have that authority?" I pulled up the bylaws again and showed him Section 14.9, which clearly limited inspections to exterior elements visible from the street. See, nothing about backyards, nothing about entering private property without permission. They're claiming authority they don't have. The officer nodded slowly. "Okay, I see what you're saying, but this is really a civil matter between you and your HOA. Unless you want to press charges for trespassing, there's not much I can do here." "I do want to press charges. They've been harassing me and other residents for weeks. This is just the latest incident. Let me talk to my supervisor." The officer walked back to his patrol car and had a conversation on his radio. After a few minutes, he returned. "My supervisor says we can file a report for trespassing, but the DA probably won't prosecute over something like this. It's pretty minor, and with the HOA claiming they had authority, it's murky. Your best bet is to handle this through civil court." I was frustrated but not surprised. "Fine. Can you at least tell them to stay off my property?" "I can do that." The officer went back to Linda and Brenda and had another conversation. I saw Brenda throw up her hands in exasperation, and Linda's face was tight with anger. Finally, they got in Linda's SUV and drove off. The officer came back one more time. "I informed them that they don't have permission to enter your property, and if they do so again, you can file another report and we'll take it more seriously. I'd also recommend you get a lawyer involved if this is part of an ongoing dispute." "I already have one. Thank you, officer." After he left, I called Marcus and told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Xavier, I think it's time to go on offense here. These people aren't going to stop unless they're forced to. I'm going to draft a lawsuit against the HOA, Linda personally, and Brenda personally. We'll sue for the cost of the shovel, harassment, trespassing, violation of your civil rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We'll also seek an injunction preventing them from taking any further action against you pending resolution of the case." "How much is that going to cost me?" "I'll do it on contingency. If we win, I take a percentage of whatever we recover. If we lose, you don't owe me anything except costs, which should be minimal for a case like this. But honestly, I don't think we're going to lose. They've screwed up in so many ways that it's almost hard to believe." "What about the other residents? Can they join the lawsuit?" "We could potentially add them as plaintiffs, but that might complicate things. Let's start with your case and see how it goes. If we win, that'll set a precedent that others can use." Marcus filed the lawsuit 2 days later. I knew it had been served when I got a frantic phone call from Linda at 8 in the morning. "You're suing the HOA. Are you out of your mind? You know what this is going to cost everyone in legal fees. I'm suing you and Brenda personally for theft, harassment, and trespassing. The HOA is named as a defendant for the institutional policies that enabled your behavior, but the bulk of the liability is on you too personally." There was a long silence. "This is ridiculous. We were just doing our jobs. Everything we did was within our authority as board members. Then you should have no problem defending yourselves in court. I'll see you there." She hung up without another word. The news of the lawsuit spread through the neighborhood within hours. I got texts and calls from the other residents I'd met at Frank's house, all of them wanting to know what was happening and whether they could help. A few of them offered to testify about their own experiences with Linda and Brenda, which I gratefully accepted. The HOA's response came 3 weeks later. They filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that I had to exhaust all internal remedies before suing, and that the actions Linda and Brenda took were protected by their roles as board members. Marcus filed an opposition brief that was absolutely brutal. He laid out every violation, every instance of overreach, every fake legal threat. He attached exhibits showing the fake law firm letterhead, the ridiculous fines, the notice forbidding me from talking to my neighbors. He included statements from other residents describing similar treatment. And he argued that requiring me to exhaust internal remedies was absurd when the people who controlled those remedies were the same ones who were harassing me. The hearing on the motion to dismiss was scheduled for February, which meant I had a few months to wait. In the meantime, The atmosphere in the neighborhood had shifted dramatically. People were no longer afraid to talk openly about their problems with the HOA. More residents came forward with stories of abuse and overreach. And a group started organizing to run a slate of reform candidates in the March election. Linda and Brenda tried to fight back by ramping up enforcement actions, but it backfired spectacularly. Every new fine they issued just added to the list of grievances. Every threatening letter just gave us more evidence. They were digging their own grave deeper with every move. In January, something interesting happened. I got a call from a woman named Patricia who lived 3 streets over. She said she was on the HOA board, one of the 3 other members besides Linda and Brenda, and she wanted to meet with me. We met at a coffee shop in a different part of town, away from prying eyes. Patricia was in her 50s, soft-spoken and clearly uncomfortable with conflict. "I need you to know that not everyone on the board supports what Linda and Brenda have been doing," she said quietly. "There are 5 board members total, and the 3 of us who aren't them have been increasingly uncomfortable with their methods. But they control the meetings and the agenda, and they don't listen to anyone else. Why haven't you spoken up before? Fear, mostly. Linda has a way of destroying anyone who crosses her. She'll dig into your life, find any tiny violation, and make your life hell until you back down. I've seen her do it to others, but what she's doing to you and the way she's treating the whole neighborhood, it's gone too far. I want to help." "How can you help?" "I have access to HOA records that Linda doesn't know I've copied. Financial records, meeting minutes, emails. There's evidence of misuse of funds, selective enforcement, and what I believe is election fraud. I've been documenting it for months, waiting for the right moment to act. I think this lawsuit might be that moment." She pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. "Everything's on here. Give it to your lawyer, and please don't tell anyone where you got it. I still have to live in this neighborhood and I don't want to be Linda's next target." I took the flash drive, feeling like I was in a spy movie. "Thank you, Patricia. This took a lot of courage." "Just stop them," she said. "They've turned our neighborhood into a police state, and it needs to end." I gave the flash drive to Marcus that same day. He spent the weekend going through the files, and when he called me on Monday morning, he sounded excited. "Xavier, this is a gold mine. There's evidence here of Linda and Brenda using HOA funds for personal expenses. They've been paying themselves consulting fees that aren't authorized anywhere in the bylaws. There are emails showing they deliberately targeted residents they didn't like with enforcement actions while ignoring violations by their friends. And there's clear evidence that they manipulated the last 2 elections by disqualifying ballots from people they knew would vote against them." "Is that enough to win the case?" "It's enough to win the case. Get them removed from the board and potentially have them charged criminally for embezzlement and fraud. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is criminal conduct." Marcus immediately filed an amended complaint adding counts for fraud and embezzlement. And he sent a copy of the financial records to the district attorney's office with a request that they investigate. He also filed an emergency motion asking the court to remove Linda and Brenda from their board positions pending the outcome of the lawsuit. Things moved quickly after that. The judge granted the emergency motion, suspending Linda and Brenda from their board roles until the case was resolved. Patricia and the other 2 board members who weren't part of the corruption took over running the HOA, and their first act was to rescind all the fines that had been issued in the past year and to cancel the fake violations. Linda and Brenda hired their own lawyer, a real one this time, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. The DA's office opened a formal investigation into their use of HOA funds, and detectives started interviewing residents about their experiences. The civil case went to trial in April. Marcus presented our evidence methodically and devastatingly. He showed the timeline of how Linda and Brenda stole my shovel, broke it through negligence, refused to replace it, and then retaliated against me when I complained. He presented evidence of the fake law firm and the threatening letters. He brought in other residents to testify about the pattern of harassment and abuse. Linda and Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that they were just enforcing the rules and that any mistakes were honest errors in judgment, not malicious conduct. But when Marcus presented the financial records showing they'd been embezzling HOA funds for years, and the emails showing they deliberately targeted people they didn't like, that defense fell apart. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found in my favor on every count and awarded me $215 for the shovel, plus $75,000 in punitive damages for harassment and emotional distress. They also found Linda and Brenda personally liable, meaning they'd have to pay out of their own pockets, not from HOA funds. But that wasn't even the best part. 2 weeks after the civil trial ended, Linda and Brenda were arrested on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and election fraud. The DA had concluded their investigation and determined there was enough evidence to prosecute. Their criminal trial happened in September. I attended every day, watching as the prosecutors laid out the full scope of their crimes. Over the course of 6 years, they had stolen more than $200,000 from HOA funds through fake consulting fees, inflated invoices for community services that were never performed, and kickbacks from contractors. They had manipulated 3 separate elections by disqualifying legitimate ballots and, in one case, actually filling out blank ballots themselves to ensure they stayed in power. The jury found them guilty on all counts. Linda was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Brenda got 3 years and was also ordered to pay her share of the stolen money. In the months that followed, the neighborhood transformed. Under Patricia's leadership, the HOA became what it was supposed to be: a reasonable organization focused on maintaining property values and community safety, not a tool for petty tyrants to harass their neighbors. The ridiculous rules about paint colors and mailbox specifications were eliminated. The enforcement became reasonable and fair. People actually started enjoying living in the community. As for me, I used my $75,000 in punitive damages to buy a top-of-the-line snow blower and donated my old regular shovel to the HOA's legitimate community service program. I also bought a new electric snow shovel, which I keep securely locked in my garage with a camera pointed at it, just in case. Frank organized a neighborhood party in October to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the lawsuit being filed. Nearly everyone in the community showed up, and person after person came up to thank me for having the courage to stand up to Linda and Brenda when no one else would. "You changed everything," Sarah told me, raising her glass in a toast. "Before you came along, we all just accepted that this was how things were. We didn't realize we had the power to fight back." "It wasn't just me," I said, looking around at all the people who had contributed to the effort. It was everyone who was willing to speak up and share their stories. "That's what made the difference. Still," Frank said, clapping me on the shoulder, "you threw the first punch. That took guts. And the fact that it all started over a stolen snow shovel, that's going to be a story people tell around here for years." He was right about that. The story of the HOA Karen who stole my electric snow shovel and burned out the motor in under 5 minutes became legendary in our community. It was a reminder that standing up to bullies, even when they have institutional power behind them, is not only possible but necessary. It showed that ordinary people, armed with the truth and a willingness to fight for what's right, can overcome even the most entrenched corruption. And every winter, when the snow starts falling and I pull out my equipment to clear my driveway, I think about that morning when Brenda marched across my lawn with my shovel in her hands. At the time, it seemed like a minor annoyance, a petty theft that would result in nothing more than frustration and a few heated phone calls. I had no idea it would become the catalyst for bringing down a corrupt HOA board and freeing an entire neighborhood from years of harassment and abuse. The whole experience taught me something important about community and justice. It's easy to feel powerless when you're facing an organization with rules and authority, and the ability to fine you or put liens on your property. It's tempting to just pay the fine, accept the injustice, and move on with your life. But when enough people decide that they're not going to accept it anymore, when they come together and support each other and refuse to be bullied into silence, real change becomes possible. Marcus became something of a local celebrity among HOA reform advocates. He started giving talks at community meetings and writing articles about HOA abuse and how to fight it legally. He used our case as an example of how even the most aggressive HOA overreach can be challenged successfully, if you document everything and aren't afraid to take it to court. The criminal restitution process took over a year, but eventually the money Linda and Brenda had stolen was returned to the HOA. Patricia and the new board used it to make real improvements to the community, fixing the playground equipment that had been neglected for years, repaving the community center parking lot, and even hiring a legitimate snow removal service for elderly and disabled residents. And yes, that snow removal service has its own equipment now. Professional-grade snow blowers, proper maintenance contracts, trained operators. They don't need to steal shovels from residents' garages anymore. I still live in that house on Pinecrest Drive. I've made real friends in the neighborhood, people who went through the battle with me and came out the other side stronger. We have barbecues in the summer and help each other with yard work and actually enjoy being part of a community, the way it should be. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had just let it go that morning. If I had shrugged off the stolen shovel as not worth the hassle, paid the ridiculous fines, and learned to keep my head down like everyone else. Linda and Brenda would still be in power, still stealing money, still making people's lives miserable with their petty tyranny. The cycle would have continued, maybe for years more, until someone else finally had enough and decided to fight back. But I didn't let it go. I stood up for myself, and in doing so, I gave other people permission to stand up for themselves too. That's the real lesson of the story. Individual acts of resistance, even over something as seemingly trivial as a stolen snow shovel, can spark movements that change everything. Every time I see Brenda's old orange, HOA compliance officer, vest hanging in the community center, now relegated to a closet where they keep old junk nobody wants, I smile. It's a reminder of how far we've come and how much can change when people refuse to accept injustice. The neighborhood is peaceful now. The HOA functions the way it should, as a helpful organization that maintains common areas and handles legitimate community concerns, not as a weapon for control freaks to terrorize their neighbors. People paint their doors whatever color they want, within reason. They park their work trucks in their driveways. They have outdoor furniture in whatever shade of tarp they prefer. And me, I clear my own driveway with my own equipment, which stays safely locked in my garage where it belongs. I've never had another problem with anyone taking my property or harassing me about imaginary violations. Life is good, but I keep all the documentation from the case in a fireproof safe in my basement. The photos, the emails, the court filings, the newspaper articles about the trial. Not because I think I'll need them again, but because they're a reminder of what happened and why it mattered. They're evidence that justice, while sometimes slow and difficult, is possible when people are willing to fight for it. And they're a reminder that sometimes the most important battles start in the most unexpected ways. Like a woman stealing a snow shovel from a garage on a cold November morning, burning out the motor in under 5 minutes through sheer incompetence and arrogance, and unleashing a chain of events that would eventually land her in prison and free an entire community from corruption. That's the story of how an HOA Karen stole my electric snow shovel and changed my life, my neighborhood, and hopefully the lives of everyone who hears this story and realizes that they don't have to accept abuse from people in authority just because those people claim to have power. You have power too. The power to stand up, speak out, and demand better. Never forget that.